Turning to our special report on this breaking news, the Trump DOJ secretly seizing records via subpoena from those two top Democrats in Congress, Eric Swalwell and the impeachment manager against Trump, Intelligence Chair Schiff. This is not just another building block of another Trump scandal that everyone's tired of. This is actually a public confirmation of how severely the Trump administration kneecapped separation of powers, multi-century doctrines in just 4 years. So I'm going to report on why right now for you, and then we'll turn to the accountability. If they already did this, if we're only learning about it now, it's partly because so many Trump plots failed and because he's out of power. So what should be done? What can be done? Now, we all lived through this together. You watched the news, so maybe you were there with us as we reported the first steps leading up to this. Maybe you heard from critics and experts on authoritarian regimes, sometimes on television, who warned of this kind of abuse. Some of those people were initially dismissed, but they were right. So I want to be clear with you about how far back this began. It's about taking Donald Trump literally, and whoever the next would-be Trump might be. 2020 showed how far he would go to end democracy and try to be a dictator. That's why he's still under investigation tonight in Georgia. But back to Comey in 2017 in Russia, we had clear evidence on the plans. And this was before the other scandals. Donald Trump was already demanding, right when he got into office, that the FBI jail reporters. He talked about it. He tweeted about it. But he also secretly ordered it. And what was his chosen vehicle? A leak probe. And we know that because the plot was so unusual and suspect that then FBI Director Comey wrote down Trump's demands as incriminating evidence against Trump. He didn't know then he'd be fired, but by May 2017, we were learning about those requests and Trump's follow-up in 2018. And after Comey was fired for several reasons, of course, including his falling out with Trump over resisting these kinds of demands, the world learned how Trump, who sometimes feigned a kind of ignorance of government in public, was actually secretly hatching quite detailed plots to use leak investigations as the pretext to intimidate reporters, to try to jail them. And tonight, with everything we now know, with what we were just discussing at the top of the broadcast, consider how that same probe was used to get at Trump's opponents in Congress, a leak probe. Listen to how Comey was recounting Trump's obsession with aggressively pursuing leaks. Now, caveat, done the right way, a proper leak probe can, of course, be valid, but the evidence shows Trump had other goals in mind.
I passed along the president's message about the importance of aggressively pursuing leaks of classified information, which is a goal I share. And I passed that along to the Attorney General. I think it was the next morning in a meeting.
Trump didn't see that, though, as a nonpartisan goal for the Attorney General to independently investigate. Comey's memos explicitly stated Trump fixated on finding leakers as the road to putting, quote, reporters in jail. And like so many Trump scandals, the plot is not only brash and obvious, but all the different ingredients are just jammed together. So this one included Russia as well. Then Attorney General Sessions demanding a hunt for the sources that were feeding accurate reports about contacts between Trump's team and Russia. And as the new reports show, it all failed. The probe didn't find the blame for any intelligence leaks on those congressional Democrats. Sessions was recused from the Russia probe itself, leading to his falling out with Trump, which is an echo of the Comey clash. So when you follow the line, the reason why it matters now is whether there's consequences for just how long-term and organized this plot was and how many people may have illicitly gone along with it. Because Trump did find an attorney general to do this kind of bidding. Barr doubled down on the probe, even though it hadn't found any members of Congress responsible for illegal leaks. But he went right back at it, tapping this loyalist to do another round on the same issue, who suspiciously had little relevant experience in the area. So the Times reports Barr went farther than the earlier prosecutors. Knowing they found nothing, he pushed this probe that continued Trump's quest to abuse DOJ to punish or get his opponents, whether they be in the press or in Congress. And under oath, Barr suspiciously dodged when asked a prescient question from a senator and lawyer who would eventually win the campaign to end Trump's presidency. So that puts this exchange with then Senator Harris in quite a new light.
Has the president or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone? Yes or no, please, sir?
The president or anybody else?
Seems you would remember something like that and be able to tell us.
Yeah, but I'm trying to grapple with the word suggest. I mean, there have been discussions of matters out there that they have not asked me to open an investigation, but
Perhaps they've suggested,
I don't know. I wouldn't say suggest.
hinted,
I don't know.
inferred? You don't know? Okay.
The scandal's big enough that the often evasive Barr is actually speaking out about it today. He says he's not aware of any congressman's records being sought in a leak case. And he says he never discussed these cases with Trump. Well, Bill Barr is going to Bill Barr. That's a parsing response that, as we just are reminded, might depend on him grappling with the word sought. And also, I have to call bull on another thing. Bill Barr doesn't need to talk to Trump about this directly when Trump tweets to the whole world that he wants these things investigated, that he wants Schiff investigated. Trump tweeted about Schiff back when he was allowed on Twitter before he was ruled a security threat, not 10 or 20 or 50 times, but 325 times. The biggest leaker in D.C., he claimed, which his own DOJ found was not the case. So even if Barr didn't talk to Trump, we know what he wanted. So what can be done tonight? Let me go through it, because it matters. Briefly. Number one, real oversight of this DOJ by Congress. The House can set up a select committee, can leave the Senate and Joe Manchin out of it. And the House can get into the questions that we were just discussing with some of our guests. Were there other subpoenas? Were there other gag orders? That's number one. Two, they can fire anyone at the DOJ tonight who was involved in this stuff. We also discussed that. Whether it was criminal or not, which is a different important thing to get to the bottom of, Congressman Schiff and others are saying it's time to clean house. Merrick Garland, the Biden DOJ, they can do that. Number three, Bill Barr can be forced to testify. I can tell you Senator Schumer and others are now demanding that. And if Barr is found to be involved in this in a way that violates some of his public claims, whether they are technically dissembled or just outright lies, or whether he perjured himself earlier, there are many possible sanctions, including, again, if the evidence provides for it, disbarment. Number four, this is bigger than any one incident or one politician. And there are precedents when the Congress wants to really deal with something and not just move on to focus on other things. The Church Committee was created after the Nixon scandals. It wasn't just backward looking. Senator Frank Church dug into not only the Watergate problems, but the larger abuses of the FBI and the CIA and the surveillance state. They got to the bottom of certain abuses, and then they actually worked to change things. It led to the creation of something you've probably heard about, the entire Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which was passed in 1978 after that kind of work. And then number five is the most obvious tonight. And some people might not want to hear this for whatever political reasons. I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about justice. The buck stops here. President Biden and Attorney General Garland are widely respected for their prudence and their institutional instincts towards cooperation. But that has its limits. Abusing power and compromising long-standing constitutional safeguards, well, if that's not the limit, I don't know what is. Accountability means action. It means going to the DOJ and rooting out the people and things that clearly were still continuing. Attorney General Garland, no matter how respected, and as a lawyer, I can tell you he was widely seen as a great judge, but he's not exactly on the ball here if it takes New York Times stories and public scandals and public pressure for him to then respond and say, oh, now we need an IG investigation. Well, sir, if that's true on the facts today, wasn't it true on the facts yesterday before you got busted by the Times for being asleep at the wheel, as this Trump-era stuff just seems to be going on inside the DOJ? At the Washington Post, Greg Sargent reports that Adam Schiff's office, for example, has already, prior to today, been asking DOJ for basic facts about the subpoenas and other members of Congress and the data and what the legal basis was. And a committee official is saying in that report the DOJ won't even answer, won't even provide a fact, accurate information, even in private. Today, as I've emphasized, it's only the public pressure that gets to these actions and headlines. So how does this all work? Well, those are 5 examples. The last is the most important, because when the buck stops at the DOJ and the White House, you can't get back to normal without dealing with the abnormal and the possibly illegal if you're not serious about it.